In recent weeks, I've gotten used to seeing interviews on television news of some poor soul who's in the hospital with COVID-19. And what he's usually saying in the interview is, I sure wish I would have gotten vaccinated. So I've gotten used to that. But not long ago, I saw a different interview, and it was different than that. So I'll show you a portion of this interview and you'll see what I mean.
Roughly 1 in 3 Louisianians are fully vaccinated. This week, the state's health department reported the highest number of COVID-19 hospitalizations since late February.
Here I am recovering, getting out of here finally tomorrow. Am I going to get a vaccine? No.
Why not?
Because there's too many issues with these vaccines.
Before you got sick, if you would have had a chance to get the vaccine and prevent this, would you have taken the vaccine?
Nope.
So you'd have gone through this?
I'd have gone through this, yes, sir. Don't shove it down my throat. That's what's local, state, federal administration is trying to do, is shove it down your throat.
What are they shoving, the science?
No, they're shoving the fact that that's their agenda. The agenda is to get you vaccinated.
Now, since I got vaccinated as soon as I could, I had a pretty strong reaction to that interview. Kind of my first one was disbelief, because I couldn't believe it. I was puzzled. I was a little bit shocked. And I'll admit I'm a little bit frustrated. And actually, after I thought about it a little bit, what I was angry. And I've been in that situation a lot of times watching the news lately. Now, I don't know if fire actually shoots out of my mouth. You'd have to ask my wife about that. But getting angry like that has been a pattern. And lately, I've begun to realize that I'm tired of getting angry. I'm tired of doing that. It doesn't change anything. It's definitely not good for me. And so I sort of made a decision to try to stop doing this knee-jerk reaction and instead make a serious effort to think about what's going on with this man. Now, I'm going to call him George for the purpose of this video. And I just decided I'm going to try to understand where he's coming from. I don't know George, but he was on my mind. I was like ruminating on George. And that led me to remember a conversation I had with a friend of mine, and that would be this fellow, Gary Peterson. And we were having a conversation a while back about something in the news that we didn't agree with, talking about a person we didn't agree with. And I was kind of doing a armchair analysis of what was wrong with this guy. And Gary said, you know, I don't agree with you. Gary said he thinks he's doing the right thing. And so that's where that conversation ended. But I thought about that comment. It stuck in my mind. And so it led me to this question. And that's kind of where this video went. What is the context in which not getting vaccinated is the right thing to do? Because Gary Peterson might be right. George, there in his hospital bed, he thinks he's doing the right thing. And I would like to try to understand what is the background story against which not getting vaccinated is the right thing to do. So I got sort of focused on this idea of the background story. That idea led me to this little graphic illustration So what I've got here is two circles. They're the same shade of gray. But if I put a white background behind that circle, we might now say that's a dark colored circle. But if I put a dark background behind that circle, we could now say that's a light colored circle. So the background changes the definition of what's in the foreground. That idea of the background and the background story, that made sense to me. So what's my background in regard to the vaccine? Well, for me, it's the polio vaccine, because I had polio in 1952. The vaccine didn't come along in time for me, but I'm well aware that because of the vaccine, we've basically eradicated polio in the United States, and we may eradicate it in the world. So for me, I had a pretty positive feeling about the vaccine, and so that's my background. So that leads me to the question of what is George's background? I obviously don't know George. The only thing I know about him is what's going on in this clip. But he does seem to have a posture of resisting. He has a pretty stubborn attitude. He's very determined. You might say he's entrenched. And to me anyway, he's pushing back against something. And he says it in the clip. It's their agenda. Don't cram it down my throat. So this idea that he's pushing back against something, that led me to another image. That's my image of George's attitude. He's pushing back against something. So what is that something? Well, he says it in the clip. He says, it's their agenda. Don't cram it down my throat. And he actually says in the clip, it's the local, the state, and the federal government. So government is what he's pushing back against. At least that's my best effort to understand him. So it's possible that to George, government means socialism. And socialism probably equals communism. And along with socialized government, at least in George's mind, this is my speculation, along comes a lot of other things, movements and ideas and developments that George does not agree with. He rejects. And he's pushing back against this whole snowball of socialized government that he perceives is coming down the hill trying to roll over the top of him. So if that's true, actually the whole thing isn't even about the vaccine. The vaccine is just a pawn in this bigger game of ideology. And if I'm correct about this, and who knows, then it's certainly possible that George sees himself as a brave patriot who's willing to sacrifice his own health to save America from destruction. So there we are. There I am with my agenda, being polio and the vaccine. So I took the shot. I think I'm doing the right thing. George's background story is this looming threat of socialism, and the vaccine is just another part of that threat. So he's refusing the vaccine, and he thinks he's doing the right thing. So there we are, we're stuck, because we both think we're doing the right thing. Well, I can't change the fact that we disagree. The only thing I can change is how I react to the disagreement. And what I'm finding is that if I just stop and remember this idea of the background story, that we have different background stories, that actually does help me break my knee-jerk habit of just seeing George on television and getting angry at him. It's actually helpful. I really don't want to be that guy. I've been that guy many times, and I'd rather not be that guy. I'd rather be this guy. A guy who just takes a moment to remember George believes his story just as much as I believe my story. And even though I don't agree with him, I think I owe him the respect that of the fact that he believes he's doing the right thing in the context of his story. Now, I'm talking about stories here, and this is something that technology has brought us that is new, and that is we've got so many stories. We got so many different people telling us so many different stories, and they run the full gamut from left to right. And it didn't used to be this way. I mean, when I was a kid, back when television was black and white, there were just 3 networks, and they went off the air at midnight. There was a time, for better or for worse, when this guy was called the most trusted man in America, and most of us believed him. So there was much more of a common story, but that is not the case for us anymore. We've got all these stories, and we all have to make up our own minds about which ones are true and which ones are not. Now, there is another dimension to this problem. And at least in my mind, another big factor is there are people behind the scenes, behind the television, so to speak, behind the websites. There are some very greedy, selfish people who are telling stories that they know are not true. But they're telling them, and they keep telling them because they are making money on those stories, or they think they are winning votes with those stories. For those people, am I angry at those people? You bet I am. Because they are polluting the whole information realm of our society. They are like a cancer in our country that's making us sick. And when it comes to those people, I'm plenty angry at them. I'd be happy to light a fire under them. But of course, they're hidden away in their comfortable carpeted offices on the 39th floor of some office building in Chicago. So we can't get to those people. I think I'm making a mistake when I'm getting angry at George on the screen. I think my anger is misplaced. What I'm really angry at is the people who are putting out the stories, making up the stories, and making money on the stories. So I'd rather be this guy. I'd rather just be the guy who remembers George, the guy on the screen. He believes his story just as much as I believe my story. And even though I don't agree with him, I have to respect the fact that he believes he's doing the right thing in the context of the story he believes. So I don't know which of these stories is right or wrong. I'm not smart enough to figure that out. But I am smart enough to remember this quote. This is from the Gospel of Matthew. By their fruits you will know them. And I have some confidence in that. I think that time will tell. I think eventually it will become clear to most of us which of these stories was true and which of them was false. So I think time will tell. And in the meantime, I'm going to try to just keep my cool and remember the better angels of my nature.